European Union and Ethiopia has a very strong, very friendly relationship. It's a relationship that is cemented both through personal relationships. It's cemented through the very strong presence of European businesses, European investors in Ethiopia who employ a lot of Ethiopians. We also have a very strong relationship based on our development cooperation in Ethiopia. So in the period 2014 to 2020, if you take everything together, what we do in terms of development cooperation in areas such as health, education, governance, human rights, and if you add what we do when it comes to humanitarian support, if you add what we do related to migration and integration issues, the European Union as an institution in the period 2014 to 2020 invests something like more than 2 billion euros in Ethiopia. Then, of course, we have 21 European Union member states active in Ethiopia as well. We work very hard to encourage more European investments in Ethiopia, not least because of the important challenges facing Ethiopia when it comes to employment. As you know, there is something like 2 to 3 million young Ethiopians entering the labor market every year. They are looking for jobs, so I see as an important task for me to make it easier for European companies to establish themselves in Ethiopia, and to make it easier for them in the relationship with the Ethiopian government, with, it could be ARCA, the Ethiopian Revenue and Customs Authority that the European Union works very closely with. And then, as always, it's of course also important for us to make it easier and facilitate for Ethiopian exporters who are interested in exploring the European market. In late in October, we hope to organize a big event for investors in Brussels, and it will be an opportunity for European investors to ask questions and find out more about the opportunities that are there on the ground in Ethiopia. We have a very substantial commitment. First of all, something I always communicate in Europe is that we should always look with great gratitude towards Ethiopia, because sadly some Europeans forget that Ethiopia has for a long period of time hosted a lot of refugees from the neighboring countries. Right now, Ethiopia hosts something like 950,000 refugees, mainly South Sudanese, Somalis, and then also, as you know, some Eritreans. And in addition to that, there are also more than 2 million internally displaced Ethiopians because of ethnic conflict, because of climate change. We have the ongoing troubles among the Guji Gedio. We have, Oromos fleeing from Somali regional state, and the Somalis fleeing from Oromo regional state, and so on and so forth. So Ethiopia is facing considerable challenges, both when it comes to the refugee population, but also when it comes to those who are Ethiopians but who have been displaced in their own country. And the European Union is doing a lot, both when it comes to humanitarian aid to facilitate, to make it easier for the refugees. But we're also doing what we can in very close coordination with the Ethiopian government and in close coordination with Ethiopian local authorities to make life easier for the internally displaced. First of all, again, I mean, the European Union has been committed for a long time to Ethiopia, and that commitment is now stronger than ever. The first 100 days of Prime Minister Abiy, I think, has taken many people by surprise. I mean, the speed of change and also the number of initiatives that have been launched. I see it as an important role for me and for my colleagues in the European Union to engage actively with the Ethiopian government to see how we can support these initiatives. And as you know, when it comes to issues such as democratization and human rights, the ability of the opposition to work freely, these are issues that the European Union have worked with and supported for a long time in Ethiopia. So now that there is a prime minister that shows very clear commitment on these issues, this is of course something we see as incredibly positive. So we are now exploring together with the Ethiopian government to see how we can best support these initiatives. We should remember that what the European Union has already been doing here means that we have strong links with different parts of the Ethiopian government, with the ministries, with agencies, but also with Ethiopian civil society. So now we try to work with all our Ethiopian partners to hear from them directly, whether they are in the government or whether they are outside the government, what they think about the initiatives of the government, how they believe that these very bold initiatives can best be transformed into reality. What Prime Minister Abiy has done is incredibly bold. It sets a very important example, not just to the region and not just to Africa, but to the entire world. I think the enthusiasm on the streets of Asmara when Prime Minister Dr. Abiy visited, the enthusiasm on the streets of Addis Ababa when President Isaias reciprocated and visited here, shows the extremely strong popular support that is out there for this process, and it also shows how for a long time Ethiopians and Eritreans alike have been waiting for an initiative like this. This will also be very important for the European Union to see how we can best support this initiative, because the first very bold steps have been taken by the Prime Minister, but as always, it now remains to be seen what will actually happen on the ground in relation to the border, the marcation of the border, that we have that there has been provisions made for easier travel than before, but how this will actually work in practice will be very important to follow, and to the extent that we can support that, we're very happy to do so, because again, what happens here sets an example to the region, to Africa, and to the rest of the world. So if such a long-standing conflict as the one between Ethiopia and Eritrea can be solved, that is something that will inspire people all over the world. And now we have a very clear, thanks to Prime Minister Dr. Abiy, a very clear message that Ethiopia accepts the agreement from 2000 on the border. That's an incredibly important first step. But when it comes to the implementation of it, I think that is where the outside world can support. The European Union always looks, and I know that Prime Minister Abiy feels the same way, extremely positively at the possibilities for deepened regional economic integration. And the potential, once the border becomes more open than it has been so far, of economic development that involves both sides of the border. I mean, if you make it easier for people to trade across the border, whether it's goods, whether it's services, it's not going to be good just for the people who live in that area. It's going to be good for the entire region, and I think the Prime Minister made that point also in Parliament, that this is also about freeing up resources that in the past have gone into the security sector on both sides of the border. Perhaps through these initiatives, this can mean that some of these resources can be freed up and to contribute to development on the ground. And that, I think, is also a very clear wish from the people there. I had the opportunity to visit Shire last week, very close to the border. Well, it's of course an extremely important signal that the Prime Minister takes this very bold step. It's a very clear break with the past in Ethiopia. I think in any country, anywhere in the world, it's always an advantage for, let's put it, the quality of the political discussion in a country, the more voices that can be heard. In any country in the world, populations want to recognize their own views also in the public discourse, and not just to have one voice. So anything that can be done to open the political space even more is supported, not least by the European Union. I think it's a very important step for reconciliation in Ethiopia between different groups and different parties. And ultimately it's about fundamental human rights, civil liberties, and it's extremely hopeful that the Prime Minister communicates a clear message that Ethiopians, irrespective of their ethnicity, irrespective of which party they support, that they should be able to express their views without fear. That is a supremely important message.